If you guys can't hear me, I'm just going to be hanging out over here. Don't know what's going on with the sound, guys, but try to let me know right away if I got sound so I don't waste any more time. Am I good, Jody? Give me a 5 by 5 if you got sound on this one. Gosh, I hate it when this happens. Stop calling me, BZ. Whatever you're doing, it's messing up my volume control here. So guys, when I'm live, please make an effort not to give me a call. Don't know what's... Okay, so we got sound now. Okay, outstanding. All right, so... Dogs. All right, so it's a beautiful day here in Summerlin. Jody says I've got some sound, which is awesome. So, hello everybody. Sorry about the first attempt at this. I don't know what happened. We didn't have any audio, so I'm just talking to air, I guess. But in any event, this is a show about the Barnes versus Felix case that was appealed all the way to the Texas Fifth Circuit and then ultimately went to the Supreme Court, and it resulted in a 9-0 decision, which is amazing, in favor of the victim's family. So, hey, what's going on, Jody Shiloh, Real Zingy, our guy 936, Dirk the Daring, Josephine Syke. Good seeing all you guys. So I know I picked up a lot of people who've been following Lane Myers, and this has some similar ripple effects, you know, with respect to criminal law and stuff like that. And an interesting win for victims in this particular case, which I'm kind of shocked, because it's rare that we have the government ruling in favor of the people. So this will be a really cool thing for us to talk about. How's it going, guys? So, in any event, and we got some 5 by 5. So this was brought to me by Kinetic Kustomz Racing. So what I try to do is I try and do shows based on what the people want, what my audience likes. And so Kinetic Kustomz sent me this link a few days ago, and I haven't had a chance to cover it because I've been buried. So I'm covering it today. And my background, I'm licensed in California and Texas. I primarily do catastrophic injury cases, personal injury. I have one of the largest motorcycle accident settlements in the history of the United States, over $10 million for a motorcycle accident victim. And it's a case that, hold on one second. Sorry about that. I just had one of those nicotine things I wanted to spit out. Woo. By the way, nicotine kills nanotechnology, guys. So if you're wondering why I take it, it's because we know that Bill Gates is trying to inject all of our food with that shit. Because the guy's a freaking psychopathic maniac, in my opinion. And I think that he comes from a long line of population control advocates, and he hates people, in my opinion. So, like a James Bond billionaire, right? Depopulation nut jobs who are now in control of many of our political parties, especially in Canada. So, anyways, let's get back into it. So Kinetic Kustomz Racing brought me this link, and I was blown away. Because finally, you know, we have a decent decision that's come down in favor of the people. And so what I'll do is just let you know a little bit more about my background. So basically what happened here with me is I started out doing a lot of criminal defense and appellate work, and so I became a lawyer on the law study program. So I had to find lawyers who would let me work for them for free, basically. And in exchange, they taught me how to become a lawyer with practical application. So that's how I did it. You just probably saw that Kim Kardashian just got her certificate of completion. She's also on the same program that I was on. And in essence, it's the old way that you became lawyers until we had law schools in the late 1800s. Prior to that, you would study law under a judge or a lawyer through like the Inns of Court system, under the ancient English system. And that's how John Jay and Abraham Lincoln and a lot of these other famous attorneys became lawyers. And that's how I became a lawyer. And it wasn't in a... So as practical application, I tried 3 cases to the jury before I was even an attorney as a certified law student. As, you know, co-counsel, of course. You can't take lead in a case like that. So just to give you an idea of my background. So although I do catastrophic injury claims, my start, when I started out, was working for civil rights attorneys and criminal defense lawyers, appellate lawyers. I ended up externing for the California Court of Appeal, the Ronald Reagan Courthouse building, and got my start that way. By doing, not by sitting in a classroom studying black letter law in Socratic discussions. But I did end up getting admitted into a law school. They waived the LSAT, and they waived my first year classes, contracts, torts, and criminal law, because I'd already passed the baby bar, which has all those subjects on it. So just to lay a foundation, a little bit about my background, knowledge, and skill to be able to discuss these types of things. So anything that I do today, I'm not giving you legal advice. I'm not practicing law here in your state. Anything that I discuss will be based upon general legal principles as a law professor would teach you. So in essence, this Barnes versus Felix case is very interesting. So what happened is this young man is cruising down the freeway. Hey, what's going on, Shahid? So this guy's cruising down the freeway, and he gets pulled over to the left side of the road by a, I'm not sure if it was like Texas Highway Patrol or whatever it was, but he pulls over to the left shoulder. He gets lit up. He pulls over to the left shoulder. The officer approaches him based on the license plates and says, hey, and I believe, and you know, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, and Kinetic, you can throw this in the chat if you want. The Highway Patrol guy says, hey, you know, you've got your license plate comes back as outstanding tickets for, I guess, cruising in the carpool lane without paying to be there, right? The toll lane. And it turns out that he'd borrowed the car from his sister, just the victim, okay, the victim, the driver of the vehicle. Turns out he'd borrowed this car from his sister, and it was a rental car. So this is a rental vehicle, and of course it's not going to come back as registered to him. It should come back, based upon lawsuits I've done in the past, it should come back as being registered to a rental car company. So that should be the first cue for the police officer to know, okay, this is a situation where this vehicle doesn't belong to this guy, so he should already be on notice. But as we know, law enforcement agencies, in particular because of Uber and things like that, are having a harder time raising revenue. And in one of my future videos, we'll look at the purpose of most law enforcement, at least Metro and Highway Patrol, is to raise revenue, is to fleece the citizenry of money, basically, unfortunately. And originally it was only supposed to, the vehicle codes were only supposed to apply to commercial vehicles engaged in commerce. So this is where I agree with the sovereign citizen movement. I believe that they're right about a lot of things, and that's one of them. And so when you start a municipal corporation, which is a city, before you start it, you do basically you hire a bunch of experts, engineers and whatnot, to determine how much money is the police force going to be able to raise, because it's a significant form of revenue for the city. And we know that obviously a lot of cities target people who are out of town because they don't want to have a problem with their local constituents when it comes time to run for re-election. So they'll try to fleece out-of-towners and stuff like that. We know that goes on. Give me a bunch of ones if you've had it happen to you. So in any event, they're having a harder and harder time raising revenue, these local law enforcement agencies. So any chance they get to pull someone over where they think they can make some easy money, they're going to do it. And lately, because there's so many illegal aliens in the country with different last names, not having insurance, et cetera, who can just sneak back across the border or use a different name, that law enforcement is now trying to target people who they know are a sure thing to pay the city. So they look for people with expensive cars. They look for people maybe with a rental car, because they know the rental car can afford to pay a ticket, right? So in this particular case, what happened was, yeah, Barnes versus Felix. That's right, BZ. So this law enforcement officer pulls this kid over, and the kid doesn't have his driver's license on him. So the law enforcement officer pulls up to the driver's side door. He asks the guy, you know, do you have your license, et cetera, et cetera. The guy says, I think I might have it in my car. Sorry, strike that, in my trunk. And he pops the trunk. And it appears as though he's turned the vehicle off, because the lights turn off at some point in the back. So it's on a police, you can see it on the police cam from the police car, the cruiser. I'm walking uphill, so I'm breathing a little heavy now. You can see based upon the footage, and Kinetic Kustomz, if you can throw the link up, let these people watch it. Pretty interesting. So he approaches the driver's side. The kid pops his trunk and goes, I think my license. But first he asked the kid, do you have any marijuana in the vehicle, drugs? Because I guess it came out that he smelled marijuana, because that's what they always smell whenever they want to arrest someone. Oh, I smelled marijuana, or I smelled like an alcoholic beverage. They always, you know, they're trained to do this in the academy, right? So standard operating procedure, just like when someone's knocked unconscious, like Carolina and Fort Worth, as they're punching them in the head, they say, stop resisting, even though they're already probably dead, right? So other people that are witnesses will say, well, I heard the officer say stop resisting, so they rule in favor of the officer. Little tricks to the trade, right? And I have a lot of friends who are in the sheriff department, so I know a lot about what's going on, and I've represented multiple whistleblowers, so I know what the strategies and tactics are for bad officers, okay? What they'll use to try and justify excessive force. So just a little bit more foundation. Thanks, BZ. Mr. Osgood, good seeing you. So basically, what ended up happening here is the kid then opens up his driver's side door. And once that happened, the officer then barricades himself between the open door and the inside of the vehicle. And at some point, it appears as though the vehicle restarts. And how do we know this? Well, because the lights went back on, or the left light went back on, like the blinker or whatever it was. You can look in the video and see for yourself. And so the kid apparently got spooked, whatever. I mean, why wouldn't he, right? I mean, this dude's standing there with a gun. He has no idea why he's being pulled over, and he's being told by the cop, words to the effect, it smells like marijuana, where's your driver's license? And the kid's like, okay, this is a setup. This is what I'm thinking as a lawyer. This is what I would be telling the jury. And so the officer is now standing between the door and the threshold of the actual vehicle, all right? Hopefully you're following me on this so far. So he's standing there facing the driver of the vehicle, and he's looking at him. The kid's already popped the trunk. You can see that based upon the footage of the cruiser. So I'm trying to help you get a picture of what's going on here. The officer, I think his name's Hernandez or something, is standing there. Oh no, Felix, strike that. Felix, obviously. And Officer Felix is standing there, and all of a sudden, it appears as though the vehicle starts to lurch forward. And so the officer, rather than stepping back and away from the vehicle, now enters the threshold of the vehicle. So this is where the Fourth Amendment comes in. And so the argument that the police department makes is that, well, the guy didn't have his driver's license, and it's a criminal offense not to have a driver's license. But the bottom line is, in Texas, the crime of not having a driver's license is what amounts to what would be a fix-it ticket in California. Simply this, that you show up in court, prove that you had a driver's license, and you pay a $10 fee, and you get it cleared. Okay, so just to show you the severity of the ticket. Now, hey James, good seeing you, buddy. Hey Daniel Bruns. So this kid, I guess he speeds off. Who knows why? Who knows what happened, right? But it doesn't matter. The officer has now entered the vehicle, and the vehicle is moving forward. And so the vehicle is moving forward. It looks like he picks up to about maybe 5 to 15 miles per hour. The officer swears at the kid, pulls out his service weapon. Without even looking where he's shooting, he's cussing at him, telling him to stop. Basically just ends the kid's life. He unalives him. Unalives this little kid. And all over apparently a carpool lane violation, outstanding fines owed on this license plate that we now know, and the cop probably knew at the time of the making of the arrest, was a rental car. And so it was fines that are attributable to obviously someone else who was driving the vehicle, renting it in the past. And unalives this guy. There are 2 internal affairs, alleged, what do they call them? Impartial investigations where the law enforcement investigates itself, right? Gee, I wonder what happened. And both investigations find and absolve the officer of any wrongdoing, saying that under the, hold on, I'm going to tell you right now, I did bring a little, this is like law school stuff, and I know Wassamata hates case law, and I get it, but I'm just going to tell you, case law and common law have been used for at least, 600 to 900 years in our common law system to interpret statutes where there is a jurisdictional split or a misunderstanding, misinterpretation of a statute or a code or a law, so everyone has comity. In other words, all of the other police or all the other citizens in the country understand what this term means, for example. And so in this case, the internal affairs criminal investigation, because potentially it could have been referred for criminal charges, right, decides that under the moment of threat test, that the officer was justified in shooting the individual because his life was in imminent peril. And because of that, he was acting in what they call self-defense. And self-defense is a valid defense to an unjustifiable homicide, aka an M-U-R-D-E, you know what, you're not supposed to say on YouTube, right? And so that's what that means basically, is that self-defense justifies. So homicide is the killing of one person by another, all right? But unjustifiable homicide is M-U-R-D-E-R. And an unjustifiable homicide would be like where you, with premeditation, want to take someone out, or maybe in the heat of the moment, you take someone out. But even heat of the moment can be a justifiable defense to mitigate or reduce the actual target crime being alleged against you by the prosecutor. Probably a little bit too much for you guys to understand. Oh, thanks, James. So, and then Bill Williamson says you're not right about the laws. Thanks, Bill, appreciate that. So, in any event, under this particular law, the way it's been interpreted by the 2 IA investigations is that basically this kid, his parents had no right of recourse by way of the criminal justice system to go after the police officer. So what do? They file a civil rights lawsuit, violation of Fourth Amendment. Why? Because the officer basically thrust himself into danger by jumping onto the vehicle as it started to move. He did not have to do that. And because driving without a license didn't rise to the level of an immediate or clear and imminent threat to the public, right? It really didn't make sense for the officer to do that. This is their argument. And as such, it was an excessive use of force, and it was in violation of the Fourth Amendment for him to jump onto the vehicle before it started to move. Remember, in this particular case, the vehicle didn't start moving until after the officer jumped onto the threshold of the vehicle. And of course, he's driving down the freeway, and you can watch the video. The dude pulls out his weapon and starts blasting. He's not even looking inside to see what he's shooting at. He just starts blasting. The kid gets unalived. And then ultimately, thanks, BZ. Yeah, and I'm going to cover your story as well, brother, for sure. BZ's got a story, too, he wants me to cover. All right, I got a lot of stories I got to cover, a lot of makeup work. So the case gets blown out at the Superior Court level. The judge finds in favor of the police in the actual, well, I think it was actually federal court where it was brought. Correct me if I'm wrong. But this dude, ultimately, his parents bring a lawsuit and they argue Fourth Amendment, civil rights, abuse of excessive force, etc., and they lose at the lower court level. They go up to the Fifth Circuit. Fifth Circuit finds the same. They say, well, the moment of peril, the moment of threat justified this being self-defense because the officer was in fear for his life, and therefore he was acting in self-defense because obviously he was on a moving vehicle going down the freeway and he could have easily been injured or killed. But the Supreme Court, it goes up to SCOTUS, and this is like 2014. This is how long it takes sometimes for justice in this country. That's why many people say it's sort of empty justice, if you get my drift. So it goes up to SCOTUS. SCOTUS, in a rare moment, actually rules in favor of we the people, which is just shocking to me that this happened. And man, it's beautiful out here. Beautiful overcast day. Look at those clouds. For all of you guys who think it's always 110 out in Nevada, it's not. It's gorgeous. By the way, take a look at these mountains. Hold on. Those are the Red Rock Mountains, guys. And on a sunny day, oh my God, just drop dead beautiful. I mean, you can't even get much more beautiful than that. So, SCOTUS basically says, look, threat thing is a joke. It basically already violated your Fourth Amendment rights to say, even though they voluntarily thrust themselves into the danger zone, it's misapplied as against we the people. And they say, no, we're no longer going to use the moment of threat test. We're going to use our age-old test of the totality of the circumstances. And I believe they actually call it something else. Hold on, Mia. We learned that it was totality of the so they call it the relevant circumstances test. All right. They call it the relevant circumstances test. See everybody out here getting squared away, trying to PT. So James, that's what it is, buddy. Supreme Court said no. Death civil rights claim for unjustified use of force, excessive force against the police and the police department. And I don't know what they ruled as far as qualified immunity goes, but typically at the federal level, if a police officer violates your civil rights, that qualified immunity will go away or it will be interpreted as to not apply because your civil rights were violated. And all the qualified immunity does is it's qualified. It is a rebuttable presumption that the officer was engaged in the lawful course and scope of his duties or her duties. And as such, there's a rebuttable presumption, which means with evidence, you can rebut that presumption in favor of the victim to move forward with the case. So I haven't read the entire SCOTUS brief because I just don't have time. But I wanted to cover this before the story got too old because Kinetic Kustomz sent it to me. So I wanted to make sure I covered it because he's one of my loyal members. And that's what we do. We answer questions, at least on Team MPE, of members because my show is member driven. It's my paid members drive what I show and what I talk about. And so Kinetic Kustomz wanted me to cover that. He's one of my moderators. And so in essence, SCOTUS has now sent the case to move forward in the actual trial. And that's where we stand. But as a result, this other test is now gone, the material danger, blah, blah, blah test. And now it's back to the totality of the circumstances test, which is common sense, that you have to look at the totality of the circumstances. Was the police officer wrong in and putting his foot on the threshold and jumping onto the vehicle as it started to move. What was the imminent public danger, the imminent public threat of a kid driving away because he didn't have his driver's license on him? Probably terrified of this guy with a gun. We've heard so many stories, especially against black people, of police unaliving them. And so obviously they get scared, they run, and then they get shot. So we have to now, instead of doing that, instead of the old test, we look at the totality of the circumstances. We don't look at and again, I'll say it again, we're no longer going to look at the moment of threat test, because a police officer could put himself into a situation where he caused the danger, he created the danger, and then unalive someone and says, well, yeah, but the guy drew down on me, or we started to drive away and my life was in danger, and as a result, I had the right to take him out. And that's what law enforcement officers and agencies have been doing. So, in essence, what happens at that point is when you file the lawsuit, the officer has the qualified immunity defense that he was engaged in the course and scope of his duties, and therefore qualified immunity shields him from civil liability. And that's why us personal injury attorneys, that's right, personal injury attorneys are also civil rights lawyers, a lot of them, not all of them, but it's the same basic test. We argue what's called vicarious liability, and it's the law of master and servant. So when we file a lawsuit against the police officer, we file a lawsuit against his or her master, in this case the municipal corporation, the state, or the city. Give me a bunch of ones if you understand that. It just means law of master and servant, which simply means that the master is liable. The master is liable for the unlawful acts of their servants, because it's implied that the servant was acting as an agent under the law of agency for their master. Hopefully that makes sense. And so, good, James. Good, Josephine and Mr. Osgood. I'm glad you guys are getting it. Good, Jody. Perfect. So as a result, this particular case created new law, which is really awesome. It's really awesome because the totality of the circumstances obviously makes a lot more sense. And hopefully we'll have less shootings and less people getting unalived. But it brings me to an interesting fact, which is this. There's something called the felony murder rule, which simply means, let's say you and I decide we want to rob a bank, and someone dies of a heart attack at the bank, right? Or somebody draws down on us and we've already committed the crime and we're out of the zone of danger, and another person comes and draws down on me and tries to shoot me. Well, if I shoot him in self-defense, I can't argue the material circumstances were that I was acting in self-defense. No, I'm going to be automatically ruled at fault under what's called the felony murder rule. So private citizens who are alleged to break the law never got that special little benefit that law enforcement has relied on. We couldn't argue. Again, I want to say this right. Private citizens couldn't argue, hey, wait a minute. Under the moment of threat test, the danger had already been escaped. Maybe it was the next day. This guy drew down on me because I'm a wanted fugitive, and I shot him in self-defense. We couldn't argue that. We would be screwed. But the police have been able to argue that for years. And so basically, it puts people into a situation now where there's a little bit of fairness, well, what I call fairness. Sorry guys, I'm just walking. I want to try to kill some time. It puts us into a situation where the police now sort of are treated more like a normal citizen when they harm someone or damage someone. And hopefully that's a good thing. Hopefully that'll be a good thing for the regular person on the street. And so look up felony murder rule as well, because it's really interesting the way that law works, because I mean, in this case, in my opinion, and this is the way I look at it, if a law enforcement officer violates your civil rights, that rises to the level of a felony. Our civil rights, our unalienable rights, is granted to us by our Creator, are no more or no less important than rights that come from our Creator. That's a big deal. And we've seen the Supreme Court, politically appointed justices over the years, erode our rights and call them privileges. Well, our rights aren't privileges. We're born with them. And for the government to come along and try to convert our rights into privileges is a travesty of justice. And it's typically the Marxist, educated judges and justices and attorneys who have done that because they don't like the concept of unalienable rights. They have told public school kids for years that it's the government that decides what our rights are. But when you look at our actual Constitution and our Bill of Rights, the Constitution was designed to bind the government with the chains of the Constitution and limit their authority. Hey, Jennifer, thank you so much for the $2 donation. Everybody, by the way, I'm getting a little winded here. Everybody make sure to like and subscribe to Jennifer's channel. And thank you for the donation, Jennifer. That was awesome. You stick around the channel long enough, and at some point I'll make you a moderator. So, just to break it down, young man's driving down the freeway or a highway. He's in a rental car that he borrowed from his sister. Plates come back as owing outstanding fines for carpool violations, apparently. And so the officer pulls the kid over. The kid says, I don't have my driver's license on me. I think it might be in the trunk. Well, in the meantime, the cop's looking to raise some revenue, obviously. Oh, I smell marijuana. Do you have any drugs in the car? The kid remains silent and says, I think that my driver's license is in the trunk. He does not respond to the question. And as he opens his door, the officer stands between the door and the driver of the vehicle. And this is on the left shoulder of the road, so there is a barrier facing the officer, and there's a barrier facing the officer and the door of the vehicle that's now ajar. And the driver of the vehicle decides, apparently he's going to drive away. Not a good idea when you got someone with a gun that can draw down on you. Thank you, James. I appreciate that. $5 from James Forbes. Everybody give me a bunch of ones for James. And for his support of Team MPE. So, I'm just enjoying this beautiful day today, guys. What a gorgeous day. Man alive, it's just absolutely drop dead gorgeous out here. Let me see if I can get you guys a shot of some additional shots of the Red Rock Mountains. Check this out. This is amazing. Hold on. So you can kind of see, look at those mountains, man. Wow. Just beautiful. The sun's just finally starting to shine on the Red Rock Mountains. Look at that, guys. Wow. Just beautiful. Just a gorgeous day. It's God's country, man. All right. No Gavin Newsom to destroy it with illegal aliens and homeless people in exchange for census-related congressional seats at your expense as a taxpayer. All right. So, ultimately, wait, here's another better shot. Check this out. Wow. Now we really got a great shot. Look at that. Woo-wee. Look at that, guys. That's just drop dead. Holy crap. Just beautiful. Man. Give me a bunch of ones if you think it's beautiful out here. All right, so. Thanks, Quana. Good seeing you. Let's OTVO. Good seeing you, brother. By the way, I do want to talk to you about your case with Brick. I'd like to cover it a little bit. I know that BZ's got something on there. It's an interesting case. It looks like the chair force arrested you guys because you were standing outside a military base, or they had local law enforcement encourage your arrest. So that'll be an interesting one. But in any event, in this particular case, the law enforcement officer jumped on the threshold of the vehicle, where you can step to get in and out of the car, and the kid's driving down the road with the cop standing next to him on the vehicle. Is the vehicle still in the shoulder of the road driving forward? And the officer pulls out a service weapon and blasts the kid. The kid's unalived. The parents don't get any luck from the internal affairs investigation, because why would the government find in favor of the victim? They always rule in favor of the officer, don't they? I mean, very rare that they actually find wrongdoing. And even if they do, the officer just gets recirculated or recycled to another police department and does the same thing again, like in Carolina and Fort Worth's case. So that's kind of what happened. And it was back in 2014, and it took just until now, just a few weeks ago, that we have a 9-0 Supreme Court case saying no, 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 no. On the civil side, okay, hear me out. On the civil side, we are allowing the parents to move forward with their wrongful death lawsuit against the law enforcement officer and the police department. Now, the issue is, well, what about the criminal charges? Why isn't this cop being charged with murder? Well, let's see what happens. I mean, there might be some ex post facto issues that come up where the law enforcement officer can say, well, wait a minute, this wasn't the law at the time that I made this arrest. The law is that it wasn't totality of the circumstances, it was moment of threat. And even though I voluntarily thrust myself into the danger by jumping onto a moving vehicle and blasting this kid who was not wanted for a violent felony, was not he was trying to find his driver's license, right? So he could argue and defend and say, well, wait a minute, there was a different test that applied back then, and therefore the prosecutor should not move forward with charges, and that I'm immune. But in most states, there's not a statute of limitation on unaliving someone. So this case really only applied to whether or not the family could move forward with their wrongful death claim. So there's still other issues that could arise, like, well, what about a criminal case against the cop? And so I'm looking forward to hearing more about what happened, and I have my staff reaching out to the attorney who represented the family to try to find out additional details, because I'm more concerned about these agencies running amok and blasting kids, especially young boys. You know, they're filled with testosterone, they get scared. They've seen all these videos and TV shows where cops are just blasting kids, so they're terrified. So naturally, they're going to be scared and want to escape because they think this guy's going to try to blast them. And then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I'd like to know more about what happened, and if the family feels that they've received justice here, at least on the civil side. And hopefully you do too. And I appreciate you guys joining me today. I had a pretty decent walk. I was going to go to the gym, but I have, as you know, pretty bad sciatica, and I just felt like a walk would be more appropriate. So I did about 1.5 miles, and now I'm headed back. Gonna take a nice hot bath with some baking soda and Epsom salt, with my G21 right next to me, so I feel safe in this free state where they have constitutional protections for keeping and bearing arms. So it's a great thing. So what do you guys think? Do you guys think that more should have been done here with respect to going after the officer? Do you think that qualified immunity has been breached? And how do you feel about qualified immunity? Do you really think that qualified immunity is going to prevent any of this stuff? Because I don't. I think what happened in Colorado, where the courts ruled that officers can't hide behind qualified immunity, it doesn't really matter. When you're a defendant in a civil case, you can seek bankruptcy protections, you can homestead, you can move assets around to where even if I get a judgment against you, I can't collect on it. So whether there's qualified immunity or not, it doesn't matter in my opinion. And the other issue is, I just think it's a red herring, because the other issue is you have the police department, master and servant. And so when I've collected judgments or verdicts against law enforcement agencies, it's always been against the department. And they absolutely indemnify the officers, and they pay for them. So a lot of you people who aren't lawyers, you're really big on overturning Terry versus Ohio, and I think it's a great step to send a message that we the people don't buy this nonsense. But as a practical issue, the qualified immunity, I don't believe, is going to do anything to prevent officers from acting outside the course and scope of their duties. And their duties are very specified and delineated, and when they go outside that, the police department will still indemnify them. So indemnify just simply means that they'll pay for it. Let me see here. And I am in California, Thor. I am licensed in California and Texas, but we homeschool our kids, and we escaped to a free state because we got tired of the single party state of California destroying our Second Amendment rights, starting with the Roberti-Roos law, and basically making it a crime to be able to defend your family with these George Soros prosecutors and reclassifying crimes as lower crimes to make it look like there's less crime in their cities, you know, like raising the theft laws to like $900 instead of, I think it was $500, to try to make it look like there's less crime in their cities. I mean, these guys are scumbags, these Berkeley types. So no, we wanted to move to a free state where now I can open carry and it's a shell issue state, that kind of thing. So anyways, that was the show for today. I hope that you guys enjoyed it, and I will also take a look at BZ Watchdog's situation, and I'd like to know a little bit more about what happened. Yeah, you're right, James, with Let's OTVO. Really good seeing you, Let's OTVO. And Dad, hey, love you, Dad. I always love saying love you, Dad, because I miss my dad. But Pooh Manchu, thanks for joining me. You're welcome, James. So I'll see you guys later, guys. And with that being said, make sure to like and subscribe. Make sure to save, because we never know when the thought police are going to take down this channel. Semper Fi, do or die.